At Trimble, we care about connection. Connecting technology, connecting solutions, connecting you. We're developing an ecosystem for transportation professionals that improves every facet of moving freight. Whether you need to improve safety, efficiency, or compliance, Trimble has you covered with telematics and fleet management, route optimization, asset maintenance, and transportation management. Wherever you're headed, your journey starts with Trimble.
Welcome back, folks. It's Thomas Wasson. You're listening to Loaded and Rolling. Now, we're continuing a conversation on this episode. Had a good one a while ago about the impacts of nuclear verdicts and what that means for the commercial vehicle industry. And so, wanted to get some more opinions. We're going to have a few guests today going to be talking about that. First off, we'll be starting with the folks at Motive. Gary Johnson, he's the head of safety at Motive. And then later on, when we get Larry Harlow, he's the director of commercial lines and claims at Sentry Insurance, and then Nick Saeger, AVP of Transportation at Sentry. So Motive and Sentry going to be the conversations here today. So we'll start with Gary. Gary, pleasure to have you on the show. I know that you all are at the forefront of helping fleets not only stay safe, but try to avoid some of these nuclear verdicts. Before we dive in, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thomas, thanks again for allowing us to be a part of your program. Gary Johnson, I have had the absolute pleasure of being in the industry now for over 40 years, or coming up on 40 years. I'm dating myself already, but had the pleasure of being in this industry for that long. I've seen a lot of changes throughout. Of course, over 27 years, those great years, I led safety efforts in multiple of organizations, and then the last 10 years, I've really supported on the technology side. So I really have had a perspective really from both sides. But the topic that we're talking about today, clearly a big concern for this industry, and that is just the impact of these nuclear verdicts. So always a joy to be on with you, Thomas, and happy to talk about this topic.
And I think it's really great, especially with your experience and stuff, because you got a front row seat into some of the changes. I started back in 2014, and it does feel like a very different world than where we're at now. Nuclear verdicts didn't really reach the topic of conversation until very recently. When you started out, what was it kind of like for fleets trying to be safe? And what was it kind of in terms of what was the safety technology that everyone was using back then?
That's a great question. And, when I really go back to where I began, we had no technology. We're talking very basics, both from a mechanical or equipment side to really the safety approach on the carrier side. When I started, we really focused on compliance. Compliance sort of seemed to be the driving force of any safety program. So, of course, you felt that if your driver qualifications are all up to date, and of course your hours of service were good, you were a safe carrier. But that really didn't seem to be the case. And then we sort of transitioned to sort of the, I'd say basic technology, where we started to see some things on the equipment like cruise control, then eventually to the adaptive cruise control. We started to see monitoring systems, but not to the level of what we have really seen them as of today. We were still, I would dare to say, a reactive process in safety. That also went with the technology side, that we are more waiting for something to happen to get the data or get any of those statistics, which would then form sort of a direction of where we wanted to address safety. Now, of course, you see where we're at today. We are in the artificial intelligence phase that has really elevated, even on the technology side, to one that we're more proactive versus a reactive safety front. So I can tell you these 40 years have flown by, but from where we were to where we are today has just been this wild wave of just experiences, especially like you said on the technology side.
And I like the topics of the proactive versus the reactive because it really felt it was really reactive when I started as well. Safety and compliance would reach out, your driver messed up, we need to talk to them. Now with the technology and the dashboards, we can predict it and we can actually get a profile. I want to see how that also impacts the insurance impacts in terms of like what that means from an insurer standpoint. So we also have our second guest joining us here, Nick Saeger, AVP of Transportation at Sentry Insurance. And Nick, pleasure to have you on as well. We may get 3 boxes, or technically 4 if you count myself. We're doing some serious business here at Loaded and Rolling, but tell us a little bit about yourself as well for folks who may not know, and then we'll dive into the insurance component of the safety.
Yeah, absolutely. Thomas, thanks for having me. Yep. As you said, Nick Saeger. I'm an actuary by trade, so I've been working in the transportation segment of Sentry Insurance for probably 8 to 9 years now. Sentry Insurance is about the 4th largest insurer of trucks in our segment out there in the trucking insurance industry. We've been a part of Sentry since 1999. Came over from John Deere Insurance at that time. So, pricing is what I'm mostly doing here at Sentry, and the intersection between nuclear verdicts and bodily injury severity trends and telematics and the information we're gathering from those is what I'm here to talk about today.
And I think that has a great tie-in between what we're also talking to Gary about, because when you're looking at insurance, and correct me if I'm wrong, you want to put things in risk buckets, and so you want to make sure that you have as much of a bucket to relatively predict what my risk and payout and my risk for cost. But with these nuclear verdicts, it feels like how do you make a bucket for potentially a nuclear verdict? So we'll dive in first. Nick, what's some of your experiences or conversations you've had from an actuarial, from an insurance standpoint? How is this starting to impact this risk calculation, which in my opinion beforehand, it felt like maybe it's a little bit easier to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So nuclear verdicts, obviously kind of a newer phenomenon out there in the trucking industry. Yes, there's always been larger verdicts and the larger than $10 million outcomes, but a new phenomenon. And the way that I have sort of described it in the past is it's sort of like what I call a casualty catastrophe, very similar to almost tornadoes. Difficult to predict. We kind of know where they're going to happen, but we don't know to which individual insured that might happen. And as a result, we're having to sort of raise the rates across the industry. It's a phenomenon that's new, and it's not just the nuclear verdicts that are really causing the severity trends to increase. It's the potential outcomes on the lower side. So maybe that fear of that nuclear verdict is causing us to have some higher settlements that we saw even 5 and 10 years ago. I mean, you've seen the ATRI study where nuclear verdicts have increased almost tenfold, or the size of them has increased almost tenfold, and the number has increased by, I want to say around 3 times over that time frame. And when you don't know when and where they're going to happen, it's very difficult for both actuaries and underwriters to make that prediction and get that rate in the right bucket, as you mentioned.
And it can get very expensive. So I'm going to preface this when I ask Gary. There was a recent state of safety report released by Motive, and it talked about some of these dangers. One of them, prefacing all of this, according to the National Safety Council, average cost of a fatal motor vehicle collision in 2020 was $1.7 million. It is now estimated to be, or can be, as high as $7 million. And then the final part, the twofer here, even smaller verdicts and settlements can hover around $427,000. So up nearly $500,000, maybe upwards of $7 million. For Gary, as you're talking with customers, having conversations, Motives in the telematics and safety game, what are some of these conversations going? Because I feel like there's a lot of fear if I own a fleet. Well, maybe it's a few $100,000, but $7 million could definitely put me out of business.
Absolutely. And, our friends at Sentry as well, we love the partnership, for the fact is you really want to take this as an approach of how the attitude is within an organization. A lot of the conversations that we have, of course, by what we deliver here at Motive, is how can we improve their safety efforts, or really the return, especially what they are seeking, by adding technology. And it really does come down to that core part of a safety program or safety plan. And that is really how do they approach that? Part of that study that you're referencing, Thomas, is really about, When we surveyed 1,100 companies, about shy of a million vehicles, one of the very first things we asked is safety a priority in your organization? And of course, 95% immediately said, absolutely. It's a huge priority. But where it got a little bit off the rails is with the second question, and that was what are your top three priorities for this given year? And safety fell third behind increased revenues and minimized expenses. So you can sort of see the struggles when you're working with, partners, partner clients, that what is very important, but more so, what is your program? What is your values within the organization, which we can help with the technology? Technology statistically has proven, and it goes back to that comment we talked about earlier, and that's getting to that proactive process that will really mitigate the risk, minimize any of the potential exposures, or eventually ending up as an incident or, heaven forbid, one of these bad accidents. So it is very much a process, very much a program approach. But it's how, technology and the partnership you can have with a provider like Motive, that we can help you achieve those goals, expectations, but especially the return on investment.
I like the partnership aspect. I want to dive into that real quick because I think that I've spoken with folks who have said you can use technology to help get you better premium. You can use the technology to show which vehicles you're actually using, which people are drivers, so you can get in that new bucket. And so we'll start with Nick. Talk a little bit about this partnership here, because as an insurance company, it felt like in the past, did you all ever get a lot of help in terms of folks actively saying, hey, please put me in a different bucket? I always felt it was kind of a different one where it's like, please don't know if I have some extra stuff, or I'm trying to hide things from you. But now we actually want to have setups, programs to where we want to share as much information to help out.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. We've had previous partnerships in the past with other companies, and it's the same thing. It takes a while for drivers and all of us drivers to become comfortable with new technologies and sharing information. So the partnership that we have with Motive, for a nominal discount in your insurance premium, if you're willing to share your information, your data, and specifically telematics data, we're able to ingest it over here at Sentry, and we're able to do some analysis, which we haven't fully finished just yet, but analysis on the data. So, how are they driving, and what, the ways that they're driving, how does that lead to or not lead to, more importantly, potential for accidents. We're also doing other interesting things with the data and information. Gary mentioned, we have safety advisors at Sentry as well that work with our fleets. If they have access to that information, they can work with them to go, okay, here's where some of your incidents are happening, or here's some of the drivers that are potentially could use a little bit more coaching. At the same time, for those that have the integrated cameras, we have the potential to ingest videos and find out when their collisions are happening, and maybe we can get those accidents reported more quickly, get our claims adjusters there more quickly, and get on the case more quickly so that we can resolve the situation for both our customer and any other people that are involved in the accident.
And a follow on here before I get Gary's thoughts, is there any early information you can share, any cool tidbits or anything that stood out and surprised you as you're going through all this data with various partnerships? Or is it kind of a similar trend where, like, time of day, large metropolitans, if you're driving on specific routes, was there anything cool that stood out that you're able to share?
The answer to that, unfortunately, is no. It's still up in the air. So all those things could potentially be interesting. We just haven't been able to pull exactly out what those things might be yet.
So we'll toss it over to Gary real quick, because you all have a report. Motive puts out information as well. I know it takes a while to digest. I had to ask, Papa Watson always said, you never know till you ask. But let's talk about what are some of the things that you've noticed with fleets. If I'm a fleet that wants to partner with Motive and go this insurance route, is there anything that sets them apart? Because I used to manage drivers, and I feel like there's definitely like some folks who are in the Stone Age and some drivers who are in the Space Age, and the challenge is like trying to get everybody, over this hurdle.
That's very well put, because you do see the various aspects, really what I would say apart, really with the partnership of our clients. And it not only is probably the level of technology they're at, but also I'd say the maturity of their current programs, but really their own safety approach. We work with variety of clients, so clearly down to the one or two vehicle, all the way up to the large enterprise. And you'd say that the sophistication is with size, and it really isn't. A lot of it has to do with just the people power and what and how things can get done. So when it comes to the partnership and when we go in and provide our innovative solutions to them, we have to make sure that we go through the steps and what I would really say the change management process of bringing a technology on and to what sophistication they want to get in. We have a variety of options within our technology. The switches or tools that can be used or can be turned off. And one of the biggest factors I see as a challenge with anybody that really is partnering to get with technology is they want to drink from that fire hose right off the beginning. They're taking in too much. You're getting all this video, you're getting all this data, and like Nick was talking, it's just the size of that data. So it's how do you manage that data to what you can really get the details out from what you want to achieve in that solution or that program. And that's the partnership. And it's no different than Sentry and with Nick and that team. He mentions about the internal support people as well. When I was on the carrier side, I utilized those type of relationships all the time because that's expertise that a Sentry or a Motive can bring to help that partner client to achieve exactly what they are. But to your real question is the sophistication of the technology and bringing it in. I have seen such a elevation in really the understanding of technology and what it can bring to a level that I'd never seen before. So it's very encouraging because it's that type of approach that you see the returns, you see the reductions, you see lower cost because of accidents.
And I kind of want to, I have a follow-on question for Nick here because this has been stewing. I spoke with Matt Leffler. One of the interesting things he talked about was the minimum required insurance for a motor carrier. So I think it was like 750. It's like under $1 million. One of the challenges, especially with nuclear verdicts, is that the law litigation firms are like, well, I can only get this much, so I've got to sue the trailer maker. I need to sue the OEM. And so looking at it from like Nick, from an insurance standpoint in the commercial space, is this something that you all are seeing? If I'm a carrier, do I need to invest in some tech like a Motive so I can like either try to get more insurance, or could it theoretically like hurt me? Would I ever want them to actually just try to sue the trailer maker like we see with Wabash and they like have the bare minimum? Is there a strategy involved if I want to get insurance and protect myself, or should I have as much coverage as possible and use the telematics? I feel like there's a game theory here.
Yeah, so the minimum limits, as set forth by the federal government, are $750,000. Most of what we see are $1 million policy limits, and really it's enough to protect the assets of the motor carrier, right? Smaller, single unit owner operators, do they need $4 million of coverage? Of course not. They don't likely have $3 million additionally worth of assets out there within their company. The other thing is, with some buying more insurance, buying higher limits costs more money, with rates increasing the way that they are due to the severity trends that we see, due to increased attorney involvement and the tactics they use to try and attack the safety of what they assume is the safety problems with trucking companies, with third-party litigation financing creeping its way into the industry, and third parties investing in and trying to monetize these nuclear verdicts. Begetting, not just nuclear verdicts, the higher settlements, and then begetting finally right back at the beginning more attorneys. We're back to the point where rates are continuing to increase across the industry. So adding higher limits if you're a motor carrier is perhaps not terribly appetizing at this time because it does cost more money.
So I wanted to follow up. So there's now third-party lenders, because I'd been involved. My wife got involved in an accident back in the day, and it takes a while to sue. They'll take their 30% if they win. So there's lending companies that say, I see you got hit by an 18-wheeler. Let me front you the funds so you can then sue them for longer to try and help. Is that a reality now? Because that's a very new phenomenon to me, but it's very clever. I'm assuming they make money off of it too.
So it's similar to that. It's more like hedge funds investing in law firms to encourage them to take those trials or those cases to trial to get those nuclear verdicts. The hedge funds then make a little bit of a return. on their investment in the law firm and the lawyer. So it's more like third parties investing in bringing more cases to trial, which gets more attorneys involved.
Somewhere out there, an analyst at Morgan Stanley's taking notes. It's like buying up HVAC companies in a local town and then just putting them all together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's definitely a new phenomenon, that's for sure. And something that government affairs team here at Sentry, for instance, is working with friends at the ATA, the American Property Casualty Insurance Association, APCIA, to at least be able to disclose that when these situations occur and third-party litigation funders are involved in cases.
Now I got to protect myself. So I'm going to toss this to Gary real quick. I need to make sure that I have dash cameras, front facing, rear facing, driver analytics, a safety program. One of the things I'm curious about is, should I have both a driver facing and a front facing camera, or because now with more litigious firms are going to look at my tapes, should I sometimes focus more on the outward because there may be more risk looking inwards? And does that impact the insurance? I'll ask Nick afterwards if it matters from an insurance standpoint.
Well, I can tell you this is one of those questions that is raised by, many companies out there, especially when they're looking at technology. I can tell you statistically, the majority of all clients out there, partners, will have both inward and outward. And it really comes down to a level of protection. I can also say that we will see, and this is where I really emphasize, you got to work with your vendor partners. You got to make sure that there's a flexibility enough to fit the program that you want. So we'll actually see those just starting out with the outside lens, but then eventually we'll see them transition back to the inside and outside, just for the fact of if you really think about it and you're involved in an incident, you still have to defend what happened inside the cab. And I get it that, there's a lot of concerns clearly with the inside. We've heard the argument about Big Brother, but I can also tell you that through proper communications, getting the drivers involved right away, you don't see the threats of them leaving. They're not, we even have a research paper on our gomotive.com that you can go and actually see that statistically people are not leaving because of it. But I can tell you, if my, rear end was in a seat again, I would personally want that inside outside just for that protection.
And Nick, do I get a bigger discount if I have the inside as well? Because I can find the bad drivers and to coach them better. Does that have any positive correlation towards premiums, or is it just having any cameras at this stage?
At this stage, it's just having any cameras, but to the extent that both inside and outside facing cameras improve your loss results, and in future policy renewals, yeah, the potential is there. So if you are taking advantage of them and using them to coach your drivers and getting better results, absolutely that can result in better premiums in the future. The other thing I would say about the cameras too, both inward and outward facing, is, yes, exonerations are great. That's really the sort of golden goose and what we're looking for when it comes to having accidents. But knowing right off the jump whether it was absolutely an at fault or absolutely not at fault situation allows our claim handlers to adjust the claims more easily. There's benefits on both sides.
Yeah, before discovery, it's like, do I need to settle or fight it? And if I have it there, even though there's a risk, you still need to know, because then you can save yourself more money by just saying, hey, look, it happened.
Yep, exactly. It's easier for the adjusters to know from the jump what happened.
That's fascinating. I think this is one of those topics that we're going to be hearing a lot more of in the future. And I know we're running out of time. I feel like we could do an hour on this. We'll have to have everybody back on. But for the sake of time, let's start with Gary. Folks want to learn more about Motive. Check out some of these papers and stuff that you've been working on, this research. What's the best way to get in contact or find out?
Best way is, as always, gomotive.com has a ton of resources. I always emphasize to definitely go there. If you want, we do have the large ATA MC&E conference coming up just in a couple days. Please stop by. We have a booth. We have a ton of people there. We're happy to demonstrate a lot of our artificial intelligence technology, but also we are doing some educational sessions as well. So always great to really get to know the industry, but also what we can provide to that industry, a part of that MC&E conference as well. But definitely reach out through gomotive.com.
Perfect. Gary, thank you so much. Nick, folks want to learn more about Sentry Insurance, check out some of this partnership. Got about 30 seconds. Best way to get in contact or learn more.
Yeah, Sentry.com is the easiest way to find more information about Sentry. You can follow us on LinkedIn, and to Gary's point, we'll have some folks at MCE as well. So look for us there. Sentry sponsors the Legal System Abuse Committee at the ATA MCE.
Excellent stuff. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. We're going to have to do this again. I think this is going to continue to happen. So it's knowledge is power in this instance. Really appreciate y'all coming on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's going to be a wrap for this segment, but if you're just joining us, Apple, YouTube, Spotify, we will be back. We'll be live. We'll be on demand. Also have a newsletter. Check it out. It goes out Thursdays at 2 p.m. So Tuesdays and Thursdays, 2 p.m. Check it out. Join us next week. We'll do it live.